Welcome everyone. Today we have our student Syed Bakir, who had a special set of challenges as he matched into internal medicine. So we want to just go over those challenges and see what tips he has for all the budding applicants for the match. So welcome Syed.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak over here.
So let's start with a bit of a background in terms of where you did your med school from, what year you graduated, and some overview about your journey.
Okay, yes. So I'm a graduate of the Khan University from Pakistan. I graduated back in 2019, and I applied to this cycle. So in between these times, I was employed constantly. I've spent the first year after graduation as a teaching associate, which is a teaching position offered by my own medical school. I was involved in undergraduate medical education. And following that, I worked as an intern in one of the public sector hospitals of my country till the match cycle.
Okay. So now let's just dive in terms of your USMLE journey. So when did you take the exams, and then what were the challenges? I mean, you've had your own very specific and hard challenges. So what were some of those challenges?
Of course, I would like to talk about the challenges and also let the future applicants know that in this overall journey, challenges are something that are expected. And I think one should jump into this journey thinking that challenges will come in and everyone will have to tackle them accordingly. So if I start off, I can start it off from how the USMLE journey and the US journey started. So the fall of 2018 was the start of my final year. And my medical college gives us a time to go for electives. And that was the time when I got my USCE. I managed 2 months of US clinical experience. And around that time, when I went to the US, I also took my Step 2 CS. So challenge number one started then and there that, yes, when I came back, I was happy. I had secured good electives at university hospitals and even LORs. But when my CS result came out, it mentioned that I had failed the CS. So at that time, I was just thinking, because there was always this thing that's having a fail on a USMLE transcript constitutes a very big red flag. And at that time, I actually thought, can I actually approach the match cycle or not? If this fail is there, is it the end of the journey? Yes, it was a shock. And luckily, I had some good mentors at that time who just told me one thing, that what's happened has happened. And the best way to approach the match cycle is to control what is still in your hands. And don't let that one failure spoil it. So from that time, I picked myself up and I decided that whatever comes up now till the match cycle, I'll try my best to not give anyone else a chance to mark something negative in my CV. So number one thing at that time was that since I'd done my electives and I knew that since I still have to take my exams, it's going to be a while till I reach the match cycle. So important thing was to make sure I maintain contact with my attendings with whom I did my electives. Because if I'm going to apply 1 year, 2 years, and they don't write the LORs immediately, but they're busy. So it's important to maintain that contact. And what else I did was, as I came back from electives at that time, despite having this shock, I made sure I wrote my elective summary. I gathered all the elective evaluations that they had written for me, and I emailed those to them. And I told them that whenever they plan to write in the LOR, to make sure it's personalized, I even mentioned in the email that I want a strong personalized LOR for my residency application. I gave them my CV, the elective summary, and everything. So even if they take their sweet time, they have everything noted down already. And that I feel is important because having personalized LORs from the US makes a lot of difference. Okay. Number one. Number two was taking the exam in a planned way. So once I graduated, I used to study during final year. When I graduated, I took my job as a teaching associate, and with that teaching job, I gave my step one. And I planned step one in a way that I will not rush it. At the same time, give it the optimum time to make sure I score in the right range, because I knew I had one CS fail and I could not afford another problem. And of course, if that comes up, you can deal with it, but that was the target at that time. So I used some of the new methods that were there at that time, and I managed to score a 257 in step one. And this was roughly 6 months to 7 months after my graduation. Some delays happened due to COVID closure, etc., and I managed step one. That year, I did not apply for the math cycle. I thought I'll give in more time for step 2 CK, because once I had 257, I tried my best to sort of maintain that consistency for step 2 CK as well, because I knew I was lacking in, because when CS fail, it reflects three things to the program. And CS fail comes up, they either would think that I don't know English, or they would think that I don't know how to communicate with patients, or they would think I'm poor in terms of clinical judgment.
Very correct. Yes.
So then my target was that when in the interview I'm entering, I must have a story with me to show that how I improved, or if there was a problem or not a problem, I proved with myself with future exams. So I took step 2 CK seriously. People generally rush through step 2 CK, but I took a good time, optimum time, and I scored a 257 in step 2 CK as well.
Wow.
And so after the step 1 confidence, it was really nice that I had a better level of confidence, and I worked hard for step 2 CK. Did not get overconfident or underconfident, and I managed to a 257 there as well. So at that time, I was happy that as far as the journey was going on, things were working out. Clinically, step 2 CK is important, and it's also an important exam because step 1 has become pass fail. All emphasis is going to be on the score. So I knew whenever I target any math cycle, be it 2 years or 3 years down the line, CK would be the more important score. So I said I will not compromise that. So far things were good. The other thing was, I was actually targeting US research position for the second year till the math cycle, because I had generally heard stories from my seniors that people who had red flags, they either covered it up with more USCE or research positions.
Correct.
USCE became a challenge at that time in that year because of COVID, of course. And I also didn't have a visa, so visa limitation, couldn't go there. So I knew USCE is not a possibility for now. I tried some research positions. Some places have their own portals online. I searched for jobs at that time, couldn't happen, etc. Plus, I also faced some exam delays due to COVID once again. So I could not really do much about it. So here's the idea. Once it's easy to give up at that time that, okay, everything is working against you, but you should try your best what you can do within those circumstances. So I heard from many seniors that programs are valuing clinical experience within your own country.
Correct.
So what I did was, when my teaching position was over and I couldn't go for a research position, I couldn't go for any USCE, and the math cycle was that year, I decided I'll join a house job, which is an intern year house job in a public sector hospital. And I joined particularly internal medicine with the idea that I will gain a lot of good experience, and it'll be something good to talk about during the interviews. So here's rule number 2, that if you already have a red flag, it's very important that you use your time properly. One should not look at your CV and say, okay, this guy has a red flag, and then this guy also has a gap of 4 months, nothing in the CV till the math cycle. So it's very important to account for every time that you spend till the math cycle from graduation, especially if you have a red flag, because then you don't want to give them any other chance. And that was really nice, because one year, 3 months, I was a teaching associate. And then about 6 months till the math cycle. In fact, even beyond the deadline, I was doing my intern job. The other thing is, that's very important for all applicants, is that whatever you do it with passion. I did teaching associate because I was passionate about teaching. I did intern year because I loved internal medicine since the beginning. And after building a good knowledge base with step 1 and step 2 CK, I actually enjoyed the intern year. And this enjoyment and passion is important. Don't forget this on the way to the math cycle, because that's how you come up with those natural stories. Every interview that I went for, the interviewers just kept on asking me, okay, you've had so many experiences. Tell us about an important experience. Tell us about this. Tell us about an interesting encounter. Tell us about what happened during the pandemic. Tell us about how you overcame this barrier in the pandemic regarding medical education. So these things can come up only naturally if you are also enjoying what you're doing. Otherwise, in the interview, you have to think about it. And that's one of the things. And yes, interview requires preparation, but in the interview, you get a lot of unexpected questions. And you can only answer your unexpected questions if your journey is truthful and you were honest to your work. Whatever patient encounters I talked about in my interview, they were there because I sincerely helped my patients out, and I sincerely loved what I did for those 6 months. That house job was like a very changing experience for me. So that's a very important message, that whatever you do, you should love it in order to really speak about it, because your passion reflects in the interview. Interviewers are experienced, and they know if someone in front is actually just making up a story, just made up a breaking bad news, or really had that experience. And whenever I spoke about things in the interview, the interviewers objectively asked about it. So that did mean that they were really testing if I was genuine about it or not. And that came off very smoothly. So I had no issues talking about my work experiences because they were natural. So that's a very important message. The other thing is that once I had a red flag, someone told me that you should make your application so good that your red flag looks like an anomaly. And of course, I tried my best. So research, it's debatable. Some people say for internal medicine, it's important. Some say it's not important. But what I think of it is that once you are going to the math cycle, you should try yourself to be as well-rounded as possible. So yes, I did not pick up a research position outside the US, but I had my own mentors that I had carried on from medical school, and I carried on those projects, and I picked up some new while I was doing this. So during these interviews, I could tell them that like an intern year, I can actually spend my time multitasking well. While I was an intern, I was also doing my research projects. While I was a teaching associate, I was teaching, I was taking my exams, and I was also working on my research projects. And once again, when you talk about research projects, make sure you are genuine about it once again. I mean, we all have a habit of partially participating in projects. I mean, I'm not saying everyone does it, but there is a possibility.
Right.
So don't do that. Whatever projects I had, no one was interested in the outcome as such. Yes, some were published, some were not published, some were on the way. They asked me what the status was. All they wanted to gauge was whether I understand my project or not. Because a lot of times they asked me, okay, you've picked up these projects. So can you tell me about one of these projects? I picked up one that was interesting. And they asked me, okay, why did you do it? What was the reason behind it? And so because I was deeply involved in those projects, I could answer those questions. So once again, the thing that comes up is that as long as your experiences are genuine and you quote them genuinely and you explain them genuinely, it's not a problem to explain them in the math cycle in general.
This is very, very comprehensive. I think it clearly shows that you put a lot of passion in this journey. I mean, you really gave it all you had, and very, very specific challenges and how you overcame. So very good. Now let's talk about the application, interview preparation, and your time with Sarthi. How did you utilize it? How did you find it useful? Telegram group and other things.
So I think joining Sarthi was a great decision. The entire reason to join Sarthi was that when I was approaching the math cycle, I knew that I had a certain disadvantage. Yes, I had worked for it, but I wanted to make sure that I approached the math cycle in the right way. And here's where Sarthi did a good job. That Sarthi, the panelist, Pawan as a mentor, everyone, they understand the dynamics of the math cycle. And I feel this is very important that when you're going for the math cycle, you should understand what is it about. And what do I mean by that? You can do a lot of great things, but you might not know how to present yourself or present that application. And so I feel the best way in which Sarthi was helpful was in streamlining the application in a way that everything depicts really well, or it's portrayed really well. Mm-hmm. And for example, if I talk about ERAS CV, the ERAS CV class, for example, the way it was done, the way it taught us how to show your achievements in a particular way. Because yes, it makes sense. The programs are reviewing so many CVs that it's actually your CV has to shine for them to get attracted to it. And that thing was really important, that in the ERAS CV, we were told that if you're describing your experience, what do they want to hear? You can write about so many things, but in like 5 lines, 6 lines, what are the things that you want to target that can be eye-catching? And I do feel that they might have helped me because I'm sure they read those experiences in my ERAS CV and they asked about those work experiences. And it was only because maybe I had written them in a certain way that they were able to read it, understand it, enjoy it, and that they asked about it. So this was really important as part of Sarthi's job in making sure that we write those ERAS CVs in a certain way and refine them towards the end, etc. And this is very important because I know people often make their priorities that what's important in a math cycle. Often there's a general perception that, okay, step score, USCE, medical school, these things are important. They help us filter out, etc. But I think in a math cycle, when you are going, especially when things become challenging, unexpected things happen in every math cycle. Supplemental app, for example, was something new this time. So you cannot pick and choose what is important. If ERAS CV has to be refined, that's something that you have to certify once, then you have to put your work in. And I think Sarthi developed that understanding and made sure that most of the applicants as part of the Sarthi team, they put in the best ERAS CV as possible. Similarly, the case was with the personal statement. I feel personal statement, people, again, think of it as something they can do in 6 days and 10 days. And of course, people who are good writers can do it. Many people do it. Many people do it in 10 days. Often personal statement is not even the priority for people. Many people are taking exams till the math cycle, and it's only the last 10 days, 15 days that they have for a personal statement. But then again, you don't know what works out for you, and you don't know how you can use your personal statement. So again, Sarthi's role was very important, is telling us what the ideal structure of a personal statement should be. And I remember when the panelists were explaining to me, they actually first destroyed my personal statement. That's the first draft ever. That was completely destroyed. And that was the good part, that they tell you straight away, this is not going to work. If someone is reading so many personal statements, this is not going to work. Then they help me streamline what exactly should be there. And, very important tricks, like there are things that you don't want to come as someone who's showing off. At the same time, you don't want to hide something in your achievements. So there are ways to express something in a humble way such that both purposes are served. So there were many tricks that were taught, and I feel that approach to personal statement was very nice. And especially I use my personal statement to talk about my red flag. I feel this is also debatable. Some people say, do not project your red flags directly in front of them. Some people say, okay, don't talk about it. So some people say that you can actually, talk about it and bring it in. I decided that if the transcript is with them and they are going to read it regardless, so why not just address it in the personal statement? Right. And again, the way I addressed it in the personal statement, the CS part, was also the truth. I addressed how it was a challenge that I faced for the first time. I addressed how it brought some of the changes in me in terms of dealing with challenges better. And I wrote how I overcame it. And part of the overcoming journey is important because almost every interview asked me about this red flag. What happened? Why did you fail it? What do you think went wrong? Was the exam wrong? Or did you mess up on the real day? And how did you work on it? So these were some of the important things. And I could talk about it because I literally did work on it. All my experiences of clinically working during house job, the teaching part, the step to CK part, everything eventually forms the way you worked around that failure, how you did not let that one problem in the application spoil the rest of the application. So I feel Sarthi's role was very important in always telling us that what they want to hear and how you should project your thing. Secondly, was their role in telling us the importance of letters of interest. Now, to the majority of the world, letters of interest might not be something very important. And from what I've heard from friends and many other people don't think letters of interest help because they think if someone has to read the application, they will read it regardless or no. And I would say there's no clear answer. But I would say one thing: Sarthi taught us how to write a personalized letter of interest. And I feel in this math cycle, it was important because programs had many applications. Like ever since we switched to Zoom, of course, the number of applications have increased. Even many of the, I think it was a thing that many programs are receiving great number of applications. So I do feel if letters of interest cannot get you a call, of course, call is dependent on your credentials overall. But if a program is looking at so many applications, and you write a personalized letter of interest, there is a possibility that it might help, that it might make them maybe look at your number. No one has the answer to it, but at the end of the day, when you're going in a math cycle, you don't really know what's going to work, what's not going to work. I would say I did work on some personalized letter of interest. I might have sent at least 70 or 80. And then obviously following up on them constantly. I'm not sure if they really help, but I do think they did have a role because I was getting responses from the programs. At the end of the day, what matters more in terms of the call part is your networking. Is your networking in the program? If you have your known alumni, people you can write to, that all those things help. But at the end of the day, the exercise is still important because unless and until you don't write a certain number of letters of interest, you don't know how to communicate with the program.
Correct.
I mean, writing the first ever letter was different from writing the 80th one. So I do feel that Sarthi did a good job in explaining us that how it might help, and then really showing us how to write it. And again, this is a thing that you learn by doing it yourself. No one can really teach you how to write a great letter of interest. After writing so many, you understand how you can communicate well to the program, and communication with the program is also an important part overall.
Very good, very good. So this has been very, very informative and hopefully helpful for the applicants. Now, as we wrap up, other tips that we may have missed. What else? Is there anything else that we missed that you want to just give your tips on?
I think another tip would be to make sure you are doing something during the math cycle. Because I would say in one or two interviews, because I had mentioned the timeline of my house job, and that house job finished, for example, in November, and this interview was in January.
Mm-hmm.
So they asked, okay, so are you doing something right now, or you're just taking interviews? So at that time, I had taken a new research project that I could talk about, and once again, it was a research project that I'd recently taken. I was working on it remotely, and I was able to talk about it. Secondly, I was also taking the step 3 exam. The idea was to take it in December. So maybe I could use it. Eventually, it got canceled and I had to take it late. Nonetheless, I still took it. Then it helped me with visa choices. So I think this is a good part, that if you show the programs that you're working during the math cycle, it creates a good impression. Because at the end of the day, they all want people who love their work. So as long as you're doing something that is close to work, and especially because I would say this is more important because of Zoom. Normally, when Zoom was not there and people were traveling, I would say this question may not have been important. Now that they know that many people are taking it on Zoom and they're probably working from home, this might be a question that what are you doing? Because in Zoom, there's a great space in between. You might have an interview in November, December, you might not have it, and you're not really traveling in between. So I would say this question came up, and I was happy I was doing something that I could talk about, because I for a matter do not mess up any timeline. So I mentioned the timeline of every work very precisely in my CV. And so they asked this question: if this ended over here, what are you doing right now? So I would say this is something important. If the next cycle is still on Zoom, then try your best to do something during the math cycle that you can talk about, and don't stop working. Something that's manageable with the math cycle.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Syed. This was very, very helpful. I'm sure this motivates a lot of applicants, especially given the type of challenges you've overcome. So thank you, and congratulations again. Best wishes for your new journey.